Thank you. We will call to order the October 2017 City of Columbia Planning Commission meeting. I'd like to welcome all Planning Commission members, staff, and guests. I would now like to ask that everyone turn their cell phones and PDAs to the silent or vibrate mode. The administrator will now proceed with the roll call.
Mr. Cohn?
Here.
Ms. Hartz? Ms. James?
Here.
Mr. Stern?
Here.
Mr. Sigemeyer?
Here.
Mr. Taylor? Here. And Mr. Waits. We have quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to briefly review the meeting format. Applicants with requests before the Planning Commission are allotted a presentation time of 10 minutes. This time should include, but is not limited to, an overview of the project, the case history, and any pertinent meetings held regarding the request. This time also includes all persons presenting information on behalf of the applicant, such as attorneys, engineers, and architects. This time limit does not include any questions asked by the Planning Commission or staff regarding requests. Members of the general public are given the opportunity to address their concerns in intervals of 2 minutes. The administrator has a timer and will make presenters aware of when their time has expired. The Planning Commission reserves the right to amend these procedures on a case-by-case basis. The consent agenda. The Planning Commission uses the consent agenda to approve non-controversial or routine matters by a single motion and vote. Examples of such items include approval of site plans, annexations, and street names. If a member of the Planning Commission or the general public would like to discuss an item on the consent agenda, that item is removed from the consent agenda and considered during the meeting. The Planning Commission then approves the remaining consent agenda items. The administrator will now read the consent agenda.
The consent agenda this evening consists of the approval of the August 7th, 2017 minutes, as well as 4 site plan reviews, which consist of number 2 on the agenda, which is 2314 Pinehurst Road, a site plan, item number 3, a site plan approval for Bluff Road, Hamrick Street for multiple parcels. Item number 4, which is a site plan approval for 3800 West Avenue for multiple parcels, as well as item number 5, 10750 Two Notch Road, as well as 2 zoning map amendments, items number 6 and 7. Item 6 is for 1014 Adeline Drive, and item number 7 is for 2701 Atlas, as well as Bluff Road.
Thank you. Do any commission members or guests today wish to have items on the consent agenda removed and placed on the regular agenda? If not, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Chairman, we need to split the consent agenda into 2 votes. I need to recuse myself from item number 2.
Okay. All right, then can we have a motion to approve the consent agenda items number 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7? And 1.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item number 2.
That's probably easier. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Those items have been approved. Now we'll go back to item number 2 on the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve item number 2?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve item number 2 on the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Item number 2 is approved. We will now continue to proceed with the regular agenda tonight.
On the regular agenda this evening, the first item is number 8. It's an annexation and comprehensive plan map amendment and a zoning map amendment. This is for 1051 Market Street and 1055 Market Street. Just for a point of clarity, so everyone's aware of it, item number 9 is a zoning map amendment, and that is adjacent to this particular parcel, which is number 8. So number 8 is on Market Street and consists of an annexation and and zoning, while number 9, which we'll take up next, is just a rezoning, and it's currently in the city. So with that, that's number 8.
Okay. Any questions for staff by members of the commission? Is the applicant here? Or would the applicant like to?
But I can tell you a little bit about it if you'd like.
Yes,
Or,
I've read it.
oh, he is here. He is here.
Okay.
Would you like him to come up?
Would he like to come forward? Or if he doesn't, we'll go ahead and.
He's coming up.
My name is Boyce Hagler, and I own the property at 1051 and 1055 Market Street. The reason for the annexation is I want the water meter moved from Bluff Road, since it runs on the property line that is now occupied by Bojangles. And in talking with the water department, they said in order to move the water meter, you had to be incorporated, annexed into the city. So that's the request.
Okay, any questions for the applicant? Thank you. No further questions or discussion. I'll ask for a motion. Do I have a second? Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion is approved.
The next item on your agenda this evening is zoning map amendment for item number 9, 1037 Market Street, to rezone from the M2 to the general commercial C3 district.
Any questions from the commission to staff? All right. I guess we don't. Any questions for the applicant? No? Do I hear a motion, please? Oh, you're... Okay, please come forward, one at a time.
My name is Melissa McDowell. I am a homeowner at 1051, well, it's called Key Road, but the parking for our area is the Market Street parking area. And the reason I'm here today is because of the rezoning sign that came up, and it prompted me to make several calls this week about it. And what I was told via phone call was that the M zoning that we're under now allows parking, but if it is changed to a C or commercial, that does not allow for parking, and it would require a special exemption from the Richland County Council to allow us to park under an M. And as you know, the stadium parking right next with condos, if you don't have parking, then your condominium is worthless. So I am here to find out more information and to request that you help us protect our parking rights.
Thank you. Now, would you-
I'm also an owner of one of the units.
Could you state your name,
I'm
please?
sorry. My name is Phil Snipes. I'm owner of one of the units at 1051 Key Road. We have heard various rumors about a potential multi-story high-rise building going in. I don't know if that's the case or not. So we're just here, does that zoning allow that? And really, what has triggered this? We've received no information. As the previous person mentioned, we all park here on game day. It's a pretty hectic, crazy area. You worry about security, traffic flow, and so we're just concerned about what does this M2 really mean? Is there a plan that will be voted on down the road? Thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask a question real quick?
Yes, as unit holders, we have an easement to park. I have 2 spots. It's permanent. I think the homeowners actually pay the taxes on that. However, it is an easement, and I believe the developer has the right to do a parking garage at some point. That's in the master deed. So there is, I guess, a concern about, is this a step to a further development that we're not necessarily against, but we don't know what it is. And some of us are, you have to get off work and travel, so we're just trying to get a heads up on it so we can figure out next steps.
Thank you.
My name is Boyce Hagler. I'm the developer of Stadium Village Lofts some 5 to 10 years ago. I own the property that's in question. In the master deed, it fully explains in Exhibit H what that property can be used for. So it's my understanding that some of the present owners who own units now did not buy them from the developers, maybe bought them from previous owners, and that information may not have been passed down to them. But if they refer to the master deed, Exhibit H, it explains everything in that regard.
Thank you. So am I getting this is to rezone it from heavy industrial M2 to general commercial?
Yes, that is correct. It will not affect the current parking lot as it is. So in other words, it's on M2 or general commercial, people will still be allowed to park there. If there were any future development on the property, whether it be a multifamily development or a parking garage, if it was Zone C3, it would have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a special exception. And as it is now, we're looking at a rezoning. So any use that could potentially go into general commercial is what we are looking at today. The property is zoned heavy industrial, as is a good portion of that area. The applicant is suggesting general commercial or requesting general commercial, which is the same zoning as adjacent property.
Okay. Would anyone else like to come forward?
My name's Daniel Bone. I'm also a unit owner at Stadium Village Lofts, and again, I'll just reiterate what has already been said, is we have no information other than there was this meeting, and so we all kind of scrambled, and there are a lot of rumors going on about what's going in or what may go in, but I don't know if you know where we're talking about, but these are single story condominiums with balconies that go kind of on both sides, and I bought on the back side, which faces this parking lot, and part of the reason I don't face the stadium, some people might think that's the lesser of the size, but I like having the open space, and so just the idea of a high-rise going, which is right, it's basically my property ends, and there's a train track, and then the parking lot starts. So anything that goes on that property is going to basically be feet away from where my property line ends. And so the only thing I was at, and I don't know the process of what the vote, if it needs 3 readings, or I don't know much about this process, but all I would ask you to do is please consider allowing us to get more information before we make a change, because we didn't hear, all we heard was change from one to the other. We didn't hear what was going there. and we don't know. So, you know, I would just ask that you allow the property owners who have, you know, invested money in those units to at least understand what we're looking at so we can have more input on what the change from one to another might mean for us. So that's all I would ask.
Thank you.
Is this parking part of the required parking for the condominium project or not? Is this additional parking?
It's required for the existing.
So if this gets rezoned and something else goes there, you've got less than adequate parking for the condominiums?
It'd have to account for the parking, whether that be a parking garage or any type of other relief.
Whatever's developed there would have to allow and provide accommodations for new, for
Again,
same
my name
number
is
of parking
Boyce Hagel. Let me see if
That's
I can answer this gentleman's questions. As a developer, if there was any intimate or definitive plans, the HOA would be the first to know. So there's no imminent or immediate plans to develop that. However, I reserve the right, since I own the property and there are rights in that area, for them to refer to the master deed of Exhibit H, and it fully explains what the rights of the developers are, what my rights are. Can you repeat that, please?
Can you highlight for us just what you recall is in Exhibit H in that master deed?
It's a legal document that all owners sign at the closing that indicated their approval for Exhibit H in the master deed, which basically states the developer owns the property, the grounds that is presently there, and the air rights for further development in the future at his discretion, based on the permit's approval. The only reason for the request of the rezoning is in the event that I do not own the property in the future, I want to make sure that there's not anything going there that's not compatible with the existing buildings. So that's the rationale. It's now zoned M2 Richland County, and of course bringing it into compliance with what is now C3 with the other developments there. I think that is certainly a reasonable request.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to come forward? Any further questions for staff?
Yeah, I have one more. If this is approved, could there be some stipulation there that whatever new development takes place would provide for adequate parking that's there now for the condominiums?
You can't place conditions on a rezoning, so, you know, the request is for C3, so if the Planning Commission feels that anything that's allowed in the C3 is acceptable for that location, that is what it's being rezoned for. And any property any development that would be built there would have to comply with the zoning code, you know, at that time. So if it required X amount of spaces, then that's what would be required.
So if I understood what you said earlier was that this parking lot is required in order to meet minimum parking requirements for the condominiums.
Right, that parking, it goes with the adjacent condominiums.
So if this was a piece of property that was not zoned the same and can be rezoned at any time, how was this project ever approved to start with? I don't know how you approve a project that doesn't have adequate parking or doesn't permanently provide for adequate parking.
I'll answer the question briefly, and Brian might want to expand upon it, but in the zoning, we do allow for in certain instances, parking that's off premise if it's within a certain distance. So in this situation, it is not part of the main parcel of the condos, but it's adjacent, and then it is permitted through that easement. And it's something that actually, we have a number of parcels in the city that fall under that classification.
So if something were built on the property, what would happen to the parking?
Well, that's where that private easement between that property and the other property goes into effect, that that if the development of that parcel occurs, they have to still provide that parking.
So they do have to maintain the parking, right?
Right,
Continue
however,
the- Continue the number of parking spaces, in addition to what this particular site may require.
correct.
I'll also reiterate that any multifamily development or any development like a parking deck would go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a special exception, so there'd be that additional review that would be in place, but no new use to be placed on the property that couldn't meet the parking requirements for the residential and for the proposed new use.
And site plan reviews and so forth.
Correct. It would go for site plan review, say, for example, if it were a multifamily development or something like that.
Ryan, in Richland County Zone M2, is there a height limitation?
And M2?
Yes.
There is in the city of Columbia. I don't know in Richland County. I would want to say 50 feet, but don't quote me on that. If it were C3 in the city of Columbia, we'd be looking at a potential of 75 feet.
And just for clarification, the parcel that looks like the kind of the missing tooth, that was the item that you just addressed for annexation. The one that's highlighted on the screen in blue is actually in the city of Columbia, and it's the city of Columbia's M2, not Richland County's.
Any further questions? Can I have a motion, please?
Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the request to rezone parcel from M2.
We have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone oppose? Motion's approved.
Item number 10 for zoning map amendments this evening is 1245 UG Street and 405 Gervais Street. It is a request for major amendment to a current planned unit development commercial district within the city center design development overlay district. The applicant is here. Their plans have slightly been modified, and they're requesting a few key portions of the PUD language to be adjusted. That's indicated within your the application what those changes are. Essentially, the northern half of the parcel they're going to be developing with the site plan and building designs that were approved by DDRC. They may adjust the buildings slightly, which they would require them to return back to DDRC, but that's essentially a summary of it. And if you have questions about the text being changed, the applicant's here and staff can answer any questions.
Would the applicant like to come forward, please?
My name is Russ Davis. I'm the developer. We have amended or requesting amendment to this plan to address some economic realities for us. You may have heard we sought city support for one of the two parking garages on the original plan and have been unable to get that, actually for both of the garages. Our plan now includes, in the first phase, building one garage and having that garage exclusively available for our residents as part of the first phase. So the overall plan is not changed at this time, but we're just changing the way the phase line is drawn. Secondly, we're reducing the number of units in the first phase from 306 to 218. And thirdly, there was in the original plan a requirement to construct a city plaza, a very expensive city plaza, and we request to move that to a later phase and construct temporary access as part of our initial first phase. So, and those modifications are all requested on the simple basis of economically, this is the only way the project can proceed.
Correct me if I'm wrong, this is part of the Klein project?
It is, yes, sir.
So what we looked at, that's all right, we looked at a plan previously, didn't we? About a year ago?
I believe about a year ago, there was maybe it was even farther back, there was an
It was
amendment.
2 years ago.
It was 2 years ago, and there was,
Welcome to my life.
there was an amendment to the original PUD then.
Okay.
Look, clarification, you mentioned building 2A in Phase 1 and building 2B in Phase 2 in that southwest quadrant. Which is A and which is B?
To the left of the orange line is building 2B. To the right is building 2A. So first, phase 1 will consist of building 1, which is in the full northern side of the property there. And then we would also construct that small piece on the other side of the traffic circle, and that is building 2A.
Okay, so
It's up to that orange line.
so the part of building 2 that's immediately adjacent to Gervais Street would be
That'd be
2B.
the next phase. That's right, 2B. Yes, sir.
The parking garage would be in that phase also.
That parking garage. We are constructing the other building 1 deck along with our first phase.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to come forward? Please come up to the front, state your name. Thank you.
My name is Steve Henson. I'm a resident of the Vista, and we were, talked to the developer and all originally. I was just curious, the original plan, building 1 there were going to be some restaurants or retail involved. I didn't know if that was still going to be in the plan or not for the initial phase.
Call the applicant.
I think it said it's 35,000.
Actually, in building 1, initially that space will be occupied by our business office, and to the right-hand side, that bay would be occupied by a commercial tenant. There are, or will be, the other 2 parcels will certainly contain restaurants. I do not expect our building 1 to have a restaurant. Yes, it would. It would be someplace that was open to the public that would be a retailer. We have not identified them yet.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to come forward? If not, can I get a motion, please?
I'll make a motion that we approve the major amendment to the existing PUD C for the Klein property.
Have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone oppose? Motion passes.
The next 3 items on your agenda consist of the a comprehensive plan map amendment. They all relate to the Capital City Mill District area plan. The first item is the adoption of that, the recommendation of that plan to City Council. With that, that particular plan recommends a new land use classification for our land use plan. So item number 12 has to do with creating that particular land use classification. And then item number 13 is the amendment of the overall city land use plan so that it's the district plan and the city land use plan are coordinated, so they're not disjointed. So with that, that's a summary of items 11, 12, and 13. We'll have a presentation on the Capital Mill plan, and I just wanted to let you know that County Planning Commission did make their recommendation to County Council with no changes to the document. So just to give you an update from that joint meeting that we had just a week or so ago.
Can these all be approved at one time, or do they have to be individual?
You could, it's probably cleaner if you could make 3 separate motions, just because one's actually a resolution and the other ones are motion. They're different resolutions, so it shouldn't take too long to make 3 separate
they're all
motions.
closely tied together.
I'm sorry?
They're all closely dependent on each other, I guess.
They are all dependent upon each other. So yes, if for some reason you were not going to make a motion on item 11 today and you were to hold that, then we would probably request you to hold 12 and 13 until you make a motion on 11. They are kind of a
3-step process.
they're all, yeah, it's sort of a 3-step process, yes.
I would like to say, before you begin, that I reviewed the book, I call it the book, several times, and you did a fantastic job. I was very impressed. I really was impressed. I hope it can all come together because it will make such a difference to that area. Probably not supposed to say it, but I can't help but be impressed with it. You're up. Yes.
All right. So yes, tonight I'll just be giving a brief presentation on the Capital City Mill District.
I have to ask you to state your name, though.
Oh, sorry. Nicholas Berger. I'm with Boudreaux, one of the consultants that was part of this plan, this master plan. So again, I'll be giving a brief presentation on the Capital City Mill District Area and Corridor Plan that many of you you've reviewed, and this document basically is a whole comprehensive plan to read about the Whaley, Olympia, and Granby neighborhoods within the city of Columbia. So just to start off, I'd like to acknowledge many of the Planning Advisory Committee members that were many residents, business owners, and stakeholders within the community, and as well as we work closely with the city and county staff along this whole process, and many of the consultants of various disciplines that were involved in this. The planning process began as early as late 2015, where we gathered public input from the different stakeholders, business owners, and residents. And starting in the spring of 2016, those various sessions gave us an opportunity to then come back and develop recommendations to redevelop this area. And moving to where we are now over this year, we've gathered this report into a comprehensive plan that looks at a sort of 30,000-foot level, a master plan that creates the framework for the development to come future years, 10, 15, 20 years. So to look at this area, the Mill District actually is, part of it is in the City of Columbia municipal limits, and also part in the unincorporated area of Richland County. So the southwest of Assembly Street, and then south of Catawba Street, east of the river, and just west of the fairgrounds. Much of the area of the Mill District is a large mixture of arts, cultural, and historic places. It's a rich residential neighborhood with many different housing types, and a variety of different small commercial uses that add to the economy in the area, and close access to many of the recreational opportunities, and close to the river, and a variety of parks in the neighborhood. In the Mill District, home ownership is relatively low right now, but to take into account, that's because of, much of the Mill District is ranging from about 18 to 24. But with redevelopment of this area and attracting more residents, the home ownership rate can rise, and it will further add to the vitality and character of the community. So the whole structure of the plan, the Mill District plan, is there's a vision. This vision sets just the basic overall idea of it, that the Mill District is a thriving community, a beautiful community, attractive destination. From there, there's guiding principles that throughout the whole time that this plan will be implemented, these guiding principles encourage and move future development of this area forward. And then there's a series of goals that can range from, again, increasing home ownership rates, providing more economic development. And then the plan is divided into 4 big ideas: to implement placemaking policies and projects, and then manage the transportation and traffic, many of the at-grade rail crossings, a lot of the game day traffic, and a lot of other factors. Big idea 3 is to unify and connect the district. A lot of the district is severed in a lot of ways with bike lanes, and as well as roads are larger. We can make road diets and better utilize a lot of the different roads. And the last idea is to improve environmental stewardship. So connecting and providing greenways, managing stormwater, among others. And then of those 4 big ideas, then there's many implementation strategies, particular projects, and many of those catalyst projects that we can do right now that will make a lasting impact and kind of set the framework and get this plan going. So right now, the Mill District it's a mixture of, like I said, unincorporated Richland County and the City of Columbia municipal limits. But within that, in the city existing future land use, it's quite a few different land use categories. So this plan looks to unify those and make this a much more consolidated area of land use. So to note, of the 4 that are up there, the only one that we're proposing that you'll hear in the next presentation is the Urban Core Mixed Residential 3. That's an addition to land use that is already in the City of Columbia codes. But we're just building upon some of the other ones in orange, the Urban Core Activity Center, some smaller but commercial development activity corridor in the purple, some of that larger scale development along Assembly Street, and the employment campus, many of the areas in the blue, purple, that will provide more commercial uses, entrepreneurial, and have a close connection to the surrounding area. Again, just looking at those each individually, and just the different uses that could be allowed in these areas. So also looking at zoning, general zoning recommendations that we propose and just provide a framework would be to protect the neighborhoods. There's a lot of great residential pockets within the Mill District. We want to protect those neighborhoods from large commercial uses, protect the scale, the setbacks, and the character of the communities, and especially along Olympia and Whaley, limit large-scale developments along those streets and limit those to some reuse or small infill along those corridors, and ensure that the future development respects and reflects the architectural character of the Mill District. For big idea 2, to manage the trains, transportation, and traffic, we looked at the at-grade rail crossings. There are quite a few in the Mill District, and right there at the Hugie Street turn, we call it, where Hugie Street turns into Whaley, that's one of the biggest problems or even opportunities, though, in the Mill District to address. It causes a lot of backups, a lot of people waiting 20, 30 plus minutes for that train to go by. So for this big idea of managing the trains, transportation, and traffic, there's 5 alternatives. Each alternative looks at a different way to address, especially that Hugie Street turn, and how to manage that traffic coming down Hugie Street to get it away from the Mill District and not to have cars and other modes of transportation move through, but around, not to make the Mill District a pass-through, as many do. So alternative A is just looking at reconfiguring that Blossom Street, Hugie Street intersection, diverting people away, down Blossom, get them away from the Mill District, but also the road diet. And a road diet is basically adding bicycle and pedestrian improvements, better utilizing the space of the roads. And before I go into the next alternative, all these alternatives in the red basically they remove the rail or consolidate the rail from the red to the yellow. So it's better utilizing and consolidating the rails there, which will allow a lot of opportunity along Assembly Street for future development and character of the Mill District. B and also C look at a different flyover of how to divert that traffic from UG Street away from the Middle District or around it. And then D and E look both at a grade separation or underpass, either at UG Street or on the rail right away. So all of these different alternatives will be vetted and included in the NEPA process. The NEPA process is a process, a federal process that just looks at the cost, implementation, impacts, and it will look at each of them individually and provide some strategies and some recommendations of which one may make the most sense for this district. Looking at the bike and pedestrian connectivity, there's a lot of bike and pedestrian access around the Mill District, but it's quite a little bit disjointed, but with several different concepts that we pinpointed, some of which at the UG Street Whaley turn, UG Street Blossom intersection, the Whaley Assembly Street intersection, improvements along Whaley Street in Olympia, and improvements along Assembly. Many of those are in the plan that you reviewed, but again, they look at improving bicycle and pedestrian access, slowing people down, and making this more of a neighborhood scale and not a lot of cars, or just redeveloping that area. We also looked at a big idea of improving environmental stewardship. So we proposed Rocky Branch Greenway, bringing you all the way down from Assembly Street, all the way down to the river, and those certain points of connecting the bike and pedestrian access around. So really making this Mill District an asset that can connect us even from the Main Street, the Vista, to the Mill District and further down the river. And also improving the stormwater, like I said, a lot of opportunity. As future development goes on, there'll be very important considerations of how to manage stormwater. So as I mentioned before, there's some projects we can do right now as we dub catalyst projects. So I'll just go through a few of them, but it's to start right now is just to develop and adopt this formal agreement in this plan. We can actually begin the management of the trains right now. By adopting this, it will be involved in the NEPA process, and that will take a few years. Partner with some of the areas around, such as Vulcan Materials, begin coordinating some of those backups of the trains in the KC Rail Yard, and develop a Mill District brand identity. Some of that will be shepherded by the Planning Advisory Committee and really setting a goal or higher vision of what this Mill District would look like. Attain some of those necessary right-of-ways and easements, improve and promote many of the parks in the area, especially Pacific Park and even Olympia Park, and then perform a comprehensive traffic study. With all these alternatives, that will be a very key thing to do right away to see what the feasibility of a lot of these strategies are and whether we would have to amend them and so forth. Provide adequate public safety facilities as we add more development and more people start to live here, better fire safety facilities and a lot of those public safety facilities that are so important. And begin the complete streets implementation, meaning connecting a lot of the streets that are that may have a bike and pedestrian facility, and then it stops and then it connects again, really just completing those streets and reconnecting them. So many of these implementation strategies are assigned to multiple parties. They have different costs, many of which will need to be championed by the community and many of the stakeholders. So these are the ones we can do right now that will make most amount of change. So with that, that's a recommendation for the Capital City Mill District Area and Corridor Plan.
Thank you. Any questions?
I have a quick question for know, I feel like in my short time here, when we've gone through plans, they've always been pitched to us as kind of a framework or a blueprint, and then 2 years down the road, we're approaching and forgive me, I'm just going to use random colors, you know, a green that maybe wants to become a blue, and you guys say, well, you approved this comprehensive plan 2 years ago that this could only be green. Where's the flexibility there with staff when we adopt a plan like this with kind of rough parameters, but then as the development comes along, you know, on a case-by-case basis?
So the policy document, the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to City Council, and City Council then adopts it, and it's a policy statement. So it's not a plan that staff can just randomly choose to change. So if we're sitting with a developer and the land use plan calls for residential and the zoning calls for residential and they want commercial, our recommendation to them is that through the planning process, through the community engagement, through the adoption from the City Council, and the recommendation from the Planning Commission at the time was to have residential. And if they want to move forward with commercial, that's certainly their prerogative to ask for those changes, but staff is still going to indicate in the report what that particular plan is. So the plan is flexible. It's the prerogative of council to change that plan and to change that direction. It's not something that staff just randomly chooses or makes those kinds of things, because from our perspective, it's a process, it's a community process. It's not a planner making a decision. It's a process that was through the community and then, you know, put together through that policy statement that council adopts.
Thank you.
You mentioned costs. What are the costs between the city and the county?
In terms of some of the implementation strategies and catalyst projects? So many of the costs, or sort of $1 sign, $2 sign, $3 sign that were included in the report, those were included as, those can change. Those are just recommendations from many of our consultants on industry standards and similar projects that have been done. But again, once we get feedback from the NEPA process, especially on some of the rail alternatives, which will be some of the bigger ticket items. A lot of this is a higher level plan, so once a project begins, there'll be more narrowed down or specific costs related to these. But for the purposes of the plan, just providing ranges of potential costs for these projects. If that answers your question.
I guess my question is, who is paying for the cost? How are the costs going to be divided between the county, the city, or the community?
I'll get it.
Which I may defer to the...
So I think the costs are going to, I think the question is more who's going to pay for it versus what's it going to cost. And I think there are going to be certain things that are going to be, if it's in the county, if it's in unincorporated Richland County, it would be something that they would be sponsoring and paying for. Other types of, so for instance, a bike lane or something like that. If it's in the city and it's on a city road, that's probably something that the city is going to apply for grants, use a capital budget, or other various sorts of ways that we could finance putting in a bikeway. It could be through, there are a number of projects that are in the plan that are also in Richland County's Penny project, and so those would be funded through the Penny. In terms of some of the more expensive things like the railroad relocation, that probably is going, we probably would go through the NEPA process, and we would probably secure federal and state funds to do that. That's how a lot of large projects happen. For instance, the road reconstruction of Main Street that's happening now, that's through a Tiger grant that the city was awarded through federal funds. So similar things could occur from that perspective. There may be some projects that maybe the city puts in some funds and the county puts in some funds, and there may be some grant funds that are achieved, and so those are all kind of options. But that's one of those things that, and it kind of gets back to Brian's question about flexibility. A lot of these are high-level concepts in the plan, and so when it gets down to implementation, there'll probably be slight modifications and tweaks, but then also the creativity comes into how you fund it. Because certainly Nick could come up with a list of here's all the grants and all the opportunities now, but as we know, every annual cycle, those things change, and so if you're looking 3 or 4 years out, those funding sources what we have now may be different, called something different, and so there could be some variety there. But it's not very specific, but it's a general idea.
And in that implementation section, there are kind of assigned departments or assigned parties, and so some of those you may have noticed will list some possible grant funding options. Some of them also are things that the community is planning to take on. So like that Mill District branding that Nick mentioned, that wouldn't necessarily be something that the city or the county would take on, but something that they're looking to really make for themselves. So the goal of the plan is that there's buy-in on all ends, and so as such, they're implementation items for everyone involved.
If there are no other questions, thank you. I have a motion, please.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to approve the recommendation to adopt the Capital City Mill District Area and Corridor Plan as an addendum to the City of Columbia's comprehensive plan.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion's approved.
Item number 12 is a comprehensive plan text amendment for the text of the future land use plan classifications for the city creating the urban core mixed residential type 3 or the UCMR-3. And
so
Lee can talk about it, or you can ask questions however you prefer. Essentially, the gist of it is, as Nick said, that particular classification was created. It's mostly in the county, but some of the properties in the city are being reclassified, and it's kind of a combination of what's on the books now, which is the 1 and the 2, and there's slight variations that the community in both of those felt did not quite meet the community, and so therefore the third option was created for this kind of unique setting with mill buildings and housing.
And the goal would be that this UCMR3 district could be used throughout the city of Columbia and also throughout Richland County in the more urbanized areas when they adopt that district as well. So, for example, you may see an annexation in the future or someone looking to change their land use, the UCMR3 that might be outside of the mill district. So that's why we're doing it in the context of the Plan Columbia, the overall plan, instead of just with the mill district plan, because that could be used elsewhere as well.
Any questions for staff? May I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we recommend to adopt an amendment to the Plan Columbia Land Use Plan text to add future land use classification of urban core mixed residential type 3, UCMR-3.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion's approved.
Item 13 on your agenda is the Capital City Mill District Future Land Use Classification, which is a recommendation to amend Chapter 8.3 of the Comprehensive Plan to include the UCMR3 and all the modifications associated with the Mill District to that particular land use plan.
So this would be the map.
Any questions for staff? I'd like to get a motion, please.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the recommendation to amend Chapter 8.3 of the Columbia Plan 2018 Future Land Use Map to modify the future land use classification of these properties to the Urban Core Mixed Residential UCMR-3 Urban Core Neighborhood Activity Center UCAC-1 Community Activity Corridor AC-2 and Employment Campus as recommended by the Capital City Mill District Area and Corridor Plan, page 31, figure 22.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion's approved.
And we have one other item this evening. I just wanted to talk to all of you a little bit about our comprehensive planning process. We are in year 9 of our comprehensive plan, and by state law, we do an update every 5 years, and then we redo the comprehensive plan for the next subsequent 10 years when we get to a 10-year mark. So we're going to be undergoing that particular process. And the Mill District plan, for instance, we had a steering committee that consisted of city residents of that particular area. For the comprehensive plan, and Rick and I have talked, what we'd like to do is actually have the Planning Commission be that steering committee, rather than creating a committee of another body or of 20 or 30 people or something that like that. We thought that it really fit the Planning Commission's role for all of you to actually be the steering committee. So I wanted to kind of just let you know that that's going to be coming forward in the next couple of months. We have some consultants that are going to assist us with transportation and the housing elements. Other elements of the comprehensive plan are going to be done in-house. We are partnering also to do the cultural resource component with a process that's undergoing with One Columbia. They're doing a cultural plan, and a lot of their things that they're going to have in their cultural plan overlap with the comprehensive plan. So we're going to team up so that those resources can be pooled together from that perspective. What Rick and I have talked about a little bit is that as we go forward, we're going to have some work sessions. So rather than when we need to kind of discuss things and get direction on certain areas of the plan, we're going to call a work session together. My initial thought at the moment is that we would do that work session before the regular Planning Commission meeting, if that all works for all of you. The other option is to do a lunchtime, if you'd prefer to do like an hour in the middle of lunch. So I guess we can do something at like 4, or we could do something at lunch, but if I'm seeing heads nodding and shaking, so maybe we can make a decision this evening which you might prefer.
I personally prefer before a meeting. I mean, that's just my
4? Is that good? Okay, then we'll plan on a 4 o'clock work sessions so we can discuss those things. We don't have a particular schedule at the moment, but we'll get that to you. But I wanted to let you know that was coming. And if you have any questions about the comprehensive planning process or anything ahead of time, Lee or I would be glad to sit down and talk to you a little bit more about the state law and things like that if you feel like you want a little...
We thought that would give us a more, we'd be a lot more familiar with it. There's a lot of changes coming, so that when this comes up in the meetings, we're not kind of blindsided. What's that about?
The other thing Rick and I had talked about was that we're going to have a lot of outreach in the communities, and so if we can get a couple of you to each of those public meetings that we have, that would be really good, because I think what will really help you all make the linkage is to actually be at those public meetings and see people's comments and inputs, so that when it actually does come to you for a work session or to the final motion to City Council, you'll understand where a lot of the recommendations came from. So we'll talk about that later, about how we can split that up so everybody doesn't have to go to every meeting, but we can kind of divide and have that kind of representation. So more on that to come, I guess.
Will be more visible.
Yes.
If there's no other business or questions, I'd like to get a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. So moved.
Meeting's adjourned.
Andrea, leave our plans up here? Okay.
Trying, but look at this crazy man.